Thank you, Massimo. Good morning, everybody. I will try to bore you the less I can, just to start. First of all, numbers. 3 numbers for you, just to introduce myself. 96 and 97, my personal life, the years in which my 2 sons are born. 13 months difference between them. The 3rd number, professional, the year in which I began my adventure in Generali. A long adventure, very various, a long time, and okay, I don't want to talk much more about it. Let's enter into the content of my presentation that deals with governance. What do we mean for governance? So what do we talk when we talk about governance? We could say, just to quote the title of a novel by Raymond Carver. I don't know if one of you have read that one. I'm sure that many of you have an answer in mind, but probably answers can be very different. Someone could deal, okay, with the high level of governance of a corporation, focusing on the board and committees. Some others would focus on the basic role of shareholders. Some others could be more interested, and many are interested more on that, in the structure of the organizations, looking at the corporate functions, for instance, operating one, controlling, and so on and so forth. Just to clarify the matter of my speech, I want to underline that today, this one, I mind referring to the board of directors. Why the board of directors? Because in the most widespread governance experience around the world, the board is the center of the governance organization. And in the evolution of the practices worldwide, this is increasingly true. The board is the leading corporate body in terms of decision, of review of the corporate strategy, in terms of the overview on the management and on the implementation of the strategy. And we can see it looking at the UK Corporate Governance Code, that is a point of reference in the global corporate governance world. And we can see that what is written there, a successful company, I quote, is led by an effective and entrepreneurial board, whose role is to promote the long-term sustainable success of the company, generating value, keyword, for shareholders and contributing to the wider society. So this principle can be found in many other corporate governance codes, such as the Italian one that you can find here. Principles on this matter have been strengthening in the past years after the financial scandals that have been mentioned before and this morning. And new legal rules came into force with the aim to increase the responsibility of the board members. Driven by scandals, such responsibility has been increased in a world made smaller by globalization, increasingly interrelated, complex, riskier, and increasingly regulated, especially in the financial sector, as we saw before. In this context, the role of the board members is becoming harder and harder. I repeat, especially in the financial sector. And the competencies that they need just to fulfill their tough duties is now much more important than in the past. No board for old boys, I would say, paraphrasing the title of the famous Coen movies, No Country for Old Men. Well, competencies are important, but obviously not every single board member should be asked to skill in to run every single field in which a company decides to engage. This is not possible for human beings, especially in such a complex world. But the board, as a team, should be made up of people able to cover the most important aspects of the corporate activities, pursuing the role of strategy maker, overviewer, and decision maker of the most important corporate decision, on the basis of proposals submitted by the management, of course. Companies are required to establish a specific policy for the identification and assessment of the good repute, professional qualification, and independence requirements of board members, but that's not enough. Principle 3K of the UK Governance Code, that I will mention sometimes in my speech, sets that the board and its committees should have a combination of skills, experience, and knowledge. But this is not only a good practice written in the best governance codes. In the most developed and regulated countries, specific legal rules have been established to assure the quality of the board as a collegial corporate body. Okay. In Europe, as well as in Italy, important rules are enforced for banks and insurance companies. The latter are required to approve a specific fit and proper policy, for instance, and the Italian rules set specific rules on that, issued by IVAS. I can see here Mr. Corinti that is coming just for timely. Issuers are requested to ensure professional updating on a continuous basis, extended to the board members, providing training plans, this is very important, to ensure technical skills and knowledge necessary to confidently perform their role while respecting the nature, scale, and complexity of tasks and preserve their knowledge over time. This is written in the IVAS regulation. At the same time, the board is requested to carry out at least once a year a self-assessment on the size, composition, and functioning of the board itself as a whole, and its committees, advising on the experts who is present in the board is considered appropriate, and proposing possible correction. So you understand what is the importance for the regulators on the composition of the board, and the skills and the competencies. But how companies can guarantee the competence of the board as a whole over time? Let's go back to the UK principles in terms of succession plan. An effective succession plan must be maintained for board and senior managers. Both appointment and succession plan should be based on merit and objective criteria, and within this context should promote diversity of gender, social and ethnic backgrounds, cognitive and personal strengths. So you understand what is the legislation that is supporting the best practices today. A diversity policies for corporate body members has become statutory in the European Union with the Directive number 95, and companies are requested to disclose yearly in their management report and in the governance report such policies, their objectives, the implementation, and consequent results. Issuers can set different metrics to assess the competencies needed. One approach, coherent with the IRC view, can imply an assessment of the competencies required for the implementation of the strategy approved by the board and link them to the IRC capital mentioned before by our colleague. In particular, the competencies of the candidates could be linked to the capitals relevant in the IRC view, pursuing the scope that the competencies of the board as a whole can oversee adequately such capitals. Last spring, I supported Generali and Mid School of Management in teaching an elective course class just about the subject, focusing on a recent case of board appointment in an important Italian bank where a slate list had been presented by the outcoming board. Well, said that, The financial community is more and more interested, as we saw in the presentation before, in the quality of the board members as a prerequisite for the quality of issuers' results. In this framework, the role of the chairperson is more complex than in the past. Being engaged in governing the board and integrating the committee's work into the decision processes in compliance with laws and regulations. Besides the preparation of board meetings, increasingly full of items imposed by regulators, we saw before what was said by Mr. Galatei, the chairperson can be requested to attend many committee meetings per month. His or her participation can be appropriate also where he or she is not a member of the committee in order to align the board with all matters discussed by committees. Non-financial information related to board members' skills, knowledge, and experiences are considered carefully by many investors today to assess the quality of the issuers in the medium and long term. In line with this public need, the European legislation requires, since this year, that governance information as well as environmental and social are disclosed to the public by all issuers and in general by public interest entities within the European Union. SRI funds, we saw in the presentation that was before mine, investing in ESG-compliant issuer stocks and bonds are becoming more and more important and increasingly developed in the financial markets. And more in general, the skills of board members in terms of managing environmental and social issues are now under the scrutiny of their stakeholders. Investors are also interested in the capacity of board members to face emerging risks. The most important one today is cyber risk, probably. This is closely watched by corporate governance specialists as big asset managers, considering the huge cost suffered by issuers during last years, especially by financial services companies. Investors are increasingly concerned that senior management and directors, at least as businesses across the world, are ill-prepared for potential data breaches and other technology problems, and considering also the history, what happened over the last years. A growing number of investors are demanding that directors ensure that they are well versed in the technology issues their company could face. Nevertheless, during stewardship meetings, they often find difficult to understand the board members' knowledge of technology risk. And I can assure that during these meetings, often happens that the investors focus on this kind of issues. And according to some investors, IT skill on boards can be really important to challenge what the head of IT is doing at the inside. And board needs to be at top of it, said the head of responsibility at Hermes Investment Management. Just to conclude, my final consideration. The final message coming from what I said before. Governance is important, and in a more and more complex regulating world is increasingly important, in my opinion. Surely, a good governance is not a guarantee of success for companies, but a bad governance increases dramatically the risk to fail. The quality of the board members is paramount, and the difficult work of non-executive directors is becoming a specific profession within listed companies. The board is requested to act more and more as a team, and an effective organization within the board is key to prevent risk and take effective decisions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Michele. Pretty clear the relationship between integrated thinking and integrated governance, in my opinion. So now, Livia, I think Michele mentioned the relevance of the quality of the members. You are a managing partner of Methodos, but you are playing a very important role, the Nedcommunity, the independent association of the independent board members. So we're very interested in your presentation, but before that, the 3 magic numbers.
Okay, so I work for a change management company, and I have a focus, interest, passion for integrating ESG and long-term and short-term results and consequences in the decision-making process and into the thinking of companies and people in the companies at all levels. The numbers I chose today, the first one is very related to my company. My company is a change management company. We have to activate energies wherever we go, at all levels in the companies, from boards down to whoever in the cross-functional experience of a company. So I chose a number, if I can, yes, which is 4810. What is 4810? 4810 is the height of Mont Blanc, the king of the Alps. We are 50 in our company, and we have a huge challenge that we gave ourselves. We usually try first on ourselves what we share with clients later. And this is our expedition. By 2020, we, as a team of 50, want to be there on the top height. And Massimo suggested me to pick mountaineering things, and so I chose this, because this is really something significant. We are 50. Every month, we train and work out to go up there with different roles, respecting our diversity, but this is where we want to be. And we are growing fast. We need this to activate energies to grow faster too. Then I chose 2 numbers, easy. These 2 numbers are my boys' numbers when they were born. They are now 27 and 25. I learned a lot from them. I know how, for you, it's important and natural to integrate financial and non-financial, financial and pre-financial. It's simply the rule. It's normal. I learned from them. I'm happy to share my experience with them every single day. And I think that you are enjoying a lot, learning how much we can accelerate the speed at which companies develop if they integrate. The people in the company, which are much older than you are now, can integrate in an accelerated way ESG and ESG, financial and pre-financial, in the same decision-making process. Then let's go to my presentation. What are we talking about when we talk about ESG transformation? We talk about reports. No, Juliet said, it's very interesting, because when I talked to Paul Druckmann, I was sharing this with Juliet yesterday, when I talked to Paul Druckmann back in 2010, and I said, but why don't we think about thinking rather than only reporting? Do you think this could be a priority? It was 8 years ago. And he said, now we have to focus on the framework. And now, what I heard from Juliet today, but it's increasingly coming up, is that we're working on decision-making process. And if we want to work on decision-making process, we have to work on mindset and behaviors. And IVAS, I was sharing it with Mr. Cottini before, has a paragraph in its new regulation that says focus on behaviors. If you do not focus on behaviors, you won't make the change happen. So behavior is mindset. If you work only on financial and manufactured capital, the 2 capitals that are tangible and touchable, I say, you extract 20% of the value potential of a company. These are data that come from many different research, and that have been recently confirmed by focusing capital on the long-term research, which was very interesting in showing how long-termism is generating very significant results for long-term companies compared to those that are not long-term thinking. Those who invest in the human capital, in the intellectual capital, get much, much more and get 100% of the potential. The others stay back. And it's very clear data are coming out. They are confirming what we would think. Mr. Galateri was saying these are things that everybody would think, but they were not there in terms of data. Now we have data, we have regulation. We do not have the mindset and behaviors to support and make this come really real into the decision-making process. So if we really want to work on 100% of the full potential of companies, we have to work in an integrated company, in an integrated way that is able to start from purpose, as Larry Fink was asking, but to work on all forms of value. And it's not all. I was discussing this with Juliet before. If you say all, it's very vague. 6 is much easier because you can connect them, you can make them, you can work with them. In workshops, we really make people work on the 6 different capitals and see how they connect with risks, how they connect with stakeholders, so on and so forth. So this is what really makes this that we're saying real. And if we reflect this into what we're doing, I'm experiencing this with Nedcommunity, but Sakis Konstantonis, who's there, I'm wrapping up the whole day, so sort of. I was discussing with Sakis what integrated governance is, because Michele told us what governance is. What is integrated governance? Integrated governance is a journey to integrate pre-financials, because I love what Massimo says, talking about pre-financial. Pre-financial is what we know. We know that if you work on engagement, you generate 1% increase in engagement generate 40 million euros in profit, in additional operating profits. We know that. We know that if you work on the other capital, that is the upper part there, top right, are the 2 opportunity generation capital. If you work on intellectual capital, we know that you generate profits. So when you think about governance and you succeed into integrating ESG issues and the pre-financial issue into the value creation process of the company, this is what integrated governance is. But it implies a lot in terms of transformation of a board, because it implies a journey. Transformation is a journey. It's always a journey. It's very much on skills, experience, knowledge, as Michele was saying. I would add some processes, more or less, and culture. Because skills is one thing, but experience and knowledge is culture. And there is value, there are values, there are mission, there are visions, and there are behaviors and mindset in that. And culture is a big asset in the transformation of a board. So the ultimate target is really trying to connect everything that a board oversees, and also things we are experiencing this. We have launched a laboratory on a new leadership model for board members in Nedcommunity with a number, we are 15, 20 board members that think about how to integrate pre-financial and financial into governance. And we are now seeing that we're missing pieces in boards. The human capital is not managed, is not governed in a board. There is the remuneration committee, there is LTI, but where and when does a board think and work on the different levers and tasks that a transformation implies, that a strategy implementation implies? How can people be put on board of transformation and strategies? Boards do not think about that. When does a board think about innovation? And when they think about innovation and technical issues connected to innovation, are they aware that most of this is connected to behaviors? When I work on cybersecurity risks, I do not work on investing money on firewalls. That is something that the IT manager can do very well. We work on behaviors because we know very well that to exchange USB is one of the riskiest behaviors in a company from a cyber risk point of view. So this is the curve of transformation. We know that awareness is the very first step. Before that, there is information. Then you start growing capabilities and you get up to behaviors. Behaviors mean that when behaviors are there, you were talking a lot about culture issue for investing decision-making. And that's a big thing, because you can be aware, but spontaneous engagement with certain behaviors, investment behaviors, is not there easily. You really have to share this culture all around the company at all different levels, also for functions that could not be relevant apparently, but that are relevant. So you have to map the decision makers, you have to know who's there, who are the informal leaders in a transformation. And this is what finally happens when you have activation. You have full responsibility of people that manage those behaviors. So this is what we do when we do change. But let's see how this can be applied to NEDs, to independent board members, members of our community. Nedcommunity has 600 members now, with a very steady, fast growth recently. And we have, for the third year this year, launched, connected to the Integrated Governance Index that involuntarily Sakis contributed to generating, because he inspired us on setting the guidelines from UNEP, the UNEP working group on integrated governance. I didn't know he was behind that. We shared it, being face-to-face today. And integrated governance is there. We launched this research that we've carried on for 3 years now on all the listed companies in Italy on processes for integrated governance, drawing it from your guidelines on integrated governance. But then we decided to mirror this research in the Nedcommunity, to see whether the perception of Neds was the same as what companies were telling us. And actually, Generali was the first this year in Integrated Governance Index. So it's a very best practice. But let's see the Neds. So Mr. Galateri before was saying we have to be leaders somehow. You have to be leading this change. And boards have to lead this change. In 2016, you can see it there, the blue one, we divided the behaviors acted by board members into leading long-term strategic orientation behavior and lagging strategic orientation. When we talk about change, we have leading and lagging indicators of change. We have leading, leadership, and lagging behaviors. And 2 years ago, and last year it was almost the same, you can see that leading behaviors, leading strategic orientation in a board was very, very low. And lagging was much more significant in terms of when we say strategic orientation means strategic integrating long and short. So we decided to check this, and this is interesting because this year, for the first time after non-financial information, what happened was a steady fast rise of leading strategic orientation. And we said, but is this real? Because of course you have to check, double check. So this is what our NEDs say. The boards, for example, define and approve the company vision and long-term strategic guidelines, taking into consideration all forms of value. Are we sure that 39% of respondents have co-generated the company vision and long-term strategic guidelines? I'm not that much sure. Perhaps these boards, it is interesting, it is a good sign, but perhaps it was sort of suggested by the information received through the non-financial information. Then we asked expressly on the role of NEDs in this. And what happens is quite interesting. Because if you look at the transformation curve, you see that awareness is there, then capabilities and behavior. But before awareness, this line is very long, because there is a long piece of information that are being received by people and that are being reacted to in different ways. So our NEDs, with whom we work quite much, and from a long time, because we've been working on integrating ESG and pre-financial into the decision-making process at least 4 or 5 years ago, with a significant group of NEDs doing meetings, updates, so on and so forth, publications. So our NEDs were there, and they said last year, 2 years ago, we definitely do a lot. Our role is active. We are acting and specific, addressing strategies in assessing risk in a long-term perspective, so on and so forth. So they felt they were very active. This year, for the first time, you can see that active behaviors have lowered a lot. As if this is how we are explaining it from a psychological and change point of view. First, we were here. We were informing them. They didn't really exactly know what it was about, but they thought that as NEDs, they were ahead of others in the boards. Now that they really know, because we've been working much more and more actively involving them, exactly what it is all about, or at least they are getting to know it. They are becoming aware that their role is not as active as it should have been, as it should be, in leading their boards towards this. So this is interesting from a transformation point of view, because we are not talking about compliance here. We are not talking about publishing a report, doing an induction of half a day or 2 hours just to know what NFI is. We're talking about doing in-depth inductions that allow you to know what a scenario is, megatrend, think, act the 6 capitals, make the connections, look at an engagement survey from the human capital perspective, look at stakeholder engagement perspective. So we're talking about interactive boards that in the journey from weak corporate governance drive business-driven corporate governance. And if we want to go ahead and progress, this is our model. Culture is paramount. We have formalized a set of 5 integrated thinking mindset culture traits that can become behaviors in a board, but can become behaviors in an investment function, can become behavior in a governance function, can become behaviors wherever in a company. And the first is strategic focus and long-term. Then there is the connectivity that, of course, have consequences, have certain specific behaviors behind those, so on and so forth. Then there is the diversity, as Michele was saying, the diversity of experience. So gender, race, demography, skills, but also ESG expertise. And I'm on a steering committee for the WEF, the Italian steering committee of the WEF, on climate change in boards. I think that it's very difficult, I was discussing it with someone else, it's very difficult to know where the perimeter of the board stops and where the management starts. So it's very difficult to think board members have to be climate change experts. Perhaps you have technical consultants who can help you on that. Board members could sit on an energy company and be climate change and need some climate change expertise, definitely more focused than other companies, but they also can sit at the same time on a luxury company. Mr. Galateri said, I'm in Moncler, I'm in Generali, financial, luxury, and what else? Lavazza. So, very different companies. What he has to act is an ESG expertise. He has to know how to integrate this into the decision-making process, then apply it to the different conditions, situations, progress of strategy of the company. And the third, definitely there is an issue of board materiality statement, because materiality statements are there, but very often, at least this is our experience with NEDs, they don't even see it, they don't even understand it. So there is an issue in making them feel it, know it. Then the last, I'll go for the last only, induction and off-site meeting, not only for scenario analysis, but the envisioning of a long-term strategy. That's their task. Then the management and the implementation is up to others. So this is our next steps. We want to work on keep working on the 6 capitals in an interconnected way, reasoning of how much this connects with the 360 degrees risk culture, work at the kickoff of change process within the board, worked on soft skills within a board, because as Michele was saying, the board is a team, but very often it is not. So if you work on those 5 key mindsets for integrated thinking, you can develop a lot in terms of soft skills in a board, but focusing on what has to come rather than on tasking and results for the next quarter. That's it. Just one thing that came up before. Mr. Galateri was saying the importance of personal and professional attitudes and how much these are connected. My boys, actually 27 and 25, my boys will never feel a divide between financial and no financial. It's the same. You all, can you raise your hands? How many of you students here at MIP think that financial and pre-financial should not be strictly connected or are not strictly connected? Is there any? No. All of you think that they're strictly connected. That's part of your life. And that's part of what we are growing up with. So let's look at the committees. This is part of our research. The risk committee is the one that the most has SASTI issue on it. And if you look at personal attitudes that our members describe as theirs own, acted personally in their daily living life, it's not by chance that risk committee members are those who are most expressed in all the different environmental, social, employee well-being, and innovation attitude, the 4 capitals. So we decided to connect those, to check this. And it's quite interesting. That's just to leave you with something. So thanks a lot, and go on our Mon Bianco.
Thank you very much, Livia. Behavior is really king in this discussion. Any questions, comments? Well, I understand the level of sugar is so low. It's lunchtime. So you are a sort of heroes, because I saw your faces, even though we are 10 minutes, not so much late. But you are so focused on the presentation, and I think this is another element of the quality of our speakers, and I thanks all about that. So now, housekeeping. We have 1 hour break, very well deserved, I would say. We come back here at, I would say, 10 past 2. We have next 3 sessions, again, investment and ESG implication on investment policy, then risk, connection between risk and ESG, Standard & Poor's view, and finally, the control system to have a proper sustainability disclosure. So thanks again. See you in 1 hour here.
Can I thank the MIP for this beautiful ballroom? It's just wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.